Hey gardeners, Amy here. Welcome to my garden. Today I want to talk about this fantastic, beautiful perennial called Echinacea purpurea. I'm going to geek out a bit in this video because I absolutely love this one. This is one of my favorite natives. Scientific name of this one is Echinacea purpurea. There are several different species in the genus Echinacea. I'm going to talk specifically about purpurea, but you get the idea. There's several, and there's tons and tons of different varieties and variations, and we'll talk about that too. Common names for Echinacea purpurea include purple coneflower, eastern purple coneflower, hedgehog coneflower, or just Echinacea. I usually call it Echinacea just because that's honestly the easiest thing for me to remember, but a lot of people call it coneflower or some variation of that name. It's native to most of eastern and central North America, and it actually grows wild in their dry open woodlands, prairies, and barrens. It's USDA zone 3 through 8. Echinacea purpurea is an herbaceous perennial. It usually grows 3 to 4 feet tall, but can get as high as 6 feet at maturity. Depending on the climate, it blooms throughout the summer and into autumn. That is one of my favorite parts about this plant, is it blooms all summer. Today when I'm filming is July 2nd. It's already been going for almost 2 weeks, and it's going to keep going all the way until at least September, sometimes even later than that. So it has a really long bloom season. You get a lot of bang for your buck with a perennial like this. When it blooms for months, it's a showstopper for a long time. That's one of my favorite things about the summer blooming perennials, is that they go for weeks, if not months. Its cone-shaped flowering heads are usually, but not always, purple in the wild. Its individual flowers, or florets, within the flower heads are hermaphroditic, having both male and female organs in each flower. So some notes about the Asteraceae family, which is what this plant is a part of. Asteraceae is one of the biggest plant families in the world. It has the most genuses and the most species. This right here is not a flower. This is a flower head. And what it is a composite of hundreds of individual flowers. So if you think of a flower as having a male and or a female part, in this case it's both in each flower, but within this flower head are hundreds of those. And there are ray flowers, which we call petals, and disc flowers, which is what fills the center. All Asteraceae plants cap this. That's actually what classifies plants in the Asteraceae family. And that includes things like asters, sunflowers, dandelions, pretty much anything with this kind of quintessential flower with a center structure is probably in the Asteraceae family. It is pollinated by butterflies and bees, and in fact it's a favorite of many pollinators. The alternate leaves are oval to lanceolate, usually 2 to 12 inches long, by about 2 to 5 inches wide. The margin is tightened and toothed. The margin has kind of a toothed serration on the side. Usually, not always. It has strong, thick veins, but the real way that I usually identify Echinacea from its leaves is actually the pubescence that's on them. They're quite fuzzy, and they have the texture of almost like a cat's tongue, like sandpaper. They're really scratchy. It's definitely not something soft that I would want rubbing on my skin a lot. It's a very distinct texture. Once the flowers finish, they fade into seed heads. The seeds are favorites for birds. In fact, I've tried to collect seeds from this multiple times to add to my seed shop, and I can't. The birds beat me to it. So luckily, this is a plant that you can buy just about anywhere, seeds or otherwise, and so I'm not too worried about putting it in my seed shop. I'm hoping to put things in there that are a little harder to find elsewhere, but it is excellent forage for many, many birds. How to grow this plant? Echinacea prefers sun and a little bit of dry. It likes well-drained soil and full sun, but it does need more water than Spokane gives it. So if you live in a really dry climate like mine, you will want to give it water every week or two-ish. These ones are in the street side of my front yard, which is where I water every 1 to 2 weeks whenever I remember. They're absolutely flourishing this year. But that one in particular struggled when I planted it. It really had a hard time getting going. It was root bound in its pot, and I actually had to soak it. Like, I dug it up, soaked it, broke up the root balls, did that whole thing. I have a whole video on that process. And now it's doing fine, but it really, really did struggle at first because it couldn't get water into the root ball. Now that these are going, they're really happy. I do have another one that's closer to the house where I usually water more regularly. Last year, that thing grew almost as tall as me. So it was almost 5 feet high. Absolutely stunning. It would knock your socks off, just covered in flowers. This year, with all this tall perennial guara growing up right there, the sprinkler has not been hitting that spot. And so I've had to literally hand water around that corner because it's so dry. And that echinacea is actually struggling a lot. So it's not nearly as stunning this year as it was last, which just proves that it needs a little more water than none at all. So how to care for this plant? Honestly, this is a plant that you could completely neglect and never touch, never do anything to, and it'll grow just fine. However, if you have a tended garden where you want it to look really nice, here's what you do. In the spring is when I cut these back because I like to leave the seed heads, again, for the birds to forage, as well as for winter interest, because they really do look cool in the wintertime. And so in the spring, I cut them back. When I was a conventional gardener, before I learned about pollinator gardening and leaving the stems long and all that, I used to cut them all the way to the ground because they'd be a tiny little green mound of leaves right from the beginning of the season. Now I tend to cut them at about 12 to 16 inches high, and I leave those stems long because the stems might be used by stem nesting bees for a place to lay their eggs. Check out my spring cleanup for pollinators video, which I will link up here at the top of the screen, for details on why this is important and how stem nesting bees use stems, and also how long you need to leave them. All of those details will be in that video. By mid-spring, the new growth will have completely covered those stems that you left, so don't worry about it looking unsightly or anything. As long as it is cut, it looks intentional. And it feels weird at first, but it looks absolutely fine, and you'll get used to it and don't worry about it. And like I said, it gets covered by the new growth anyway. Then it will bloom by usually early to mid-July. This year, like I said, I think everything's really early. This was blooming by the middle of June, and it will flower for the rest of the summer. If you want it to keep flowering more profusely, a few tips. Once one of the top flowers finishes blooming, it will start sending out little side shoots with more flowers. If you want to encourage this, deadhead this one, deadhead the one at the top, down to a node, and then it will send off more blooms. To help encourage this more, you can give it a bloom boosting fertilizer. I tend to use Alaska More Bloom, but pretty much anything that encourages blooms will work here. And I don't think I've gotten around to fertilizing my own garden in like 3 or 4 years. Aside from having my crew over here to train them in how to use the fertilizer, it never happens. It just doesn't get done. I don't fertilize my own yard. So this is just what these plants would look like with pretty much no fertilizer. Maybe once a year they may have gotten something, but that's about it. And that's it. That's everything for care on this plant. You can cut it back in the spring, and you can deadhead it and fertilize it in the summer, but that's not really needed. So easy care plant here. Again, one of my favorite natives. As far as ecology goes, this plant is sought after by pollinators and avoided by mammals. Okay, so you'll see tons of butterflies on this and tons of bees on this. Just as I was filming, there was a little green sweat bee that came and visited several of these flowers. I've seen several butterflies visit these flowers, everything from yellow swallowtails, which we have lots of here, to red admirals, and I forget the name of the other one. I think it's checker spot. So many pollinators are attracted to Echinacea. The bees that are attracted to the flowers can include, but are not limited to, bumblebees, sweat bees, honeybees, the sunflower leafcutter bee, and mining bees. This is one of the native bees that we really need to be protecting. Everybody says save the bees, and what they think of is honeybees. But honeybees are fine. They're a cultivated agricultural species that will continue to be cultivated. We're really not worried about honeybees. These kinds of bees are what we really need to be worried about. And the way to help these kinds of bees is by planting native plants that they like to eat. Butterflies that visit the flowers include monarchs, swallowtails, and sulfur butterflies. It's also host to several caterpillars, including the painted lady and silvery checker spot. Birds, particularly finches, eat the seeds and disperse them through their droppings. Slugs and rabbits may also eat the foliage early after it emerges in the spring, but once it's established, it's a little too gritty and rough, so they don't tend to eat it once it gets bigger. One of the reasons I love this plant, though, is it's reliably deer resistant. I plant this for all of my rural clients, and I have never seen a deer touch it, except maybe a fawn might nibble it in the spring because fawns have to taste everything. They're great eaters. Don't you wish your own toddler would try everything that you put in front of them? Fawns do, but they'll try it and then they walk away. They don't like to eat it. It's also a traditional medicine. You've probably seen echinacea tablets and supplements and whatnot in the pharmacy or the natural supplement stores. It's been used by Native Americans for several medicinal purposes for centuries. It will also self-seed, so if you don't deadhead before winter, if you leave the seed heads to feed the birds, you might have several more little volunteers in the spring that you can either just let do their thing and let grow, fill in, or you can dig up and share with your buds. This variety, I believe, is called Green Twister, and I bought one several years ago, and it's over in my xeric bed, and it looks like it volunteered, which is a big surprise to me because here's the thing. Hybrid varieties like Green Twister are typically less attractive to pollinators. Often they're bred for a trait like this one has an ombre petal. It literally starts one color and goes to another color in the center. It's really, really cool. That's why I bought it. But this one I didn't buy for pollinators because it's not as attractive to pollinators. So I didn't expect to get any seeds from it ever because I didn't expect it to get pollinated. But I got a seed and it moved all the way over here somehow. So that's cool. On that topic, though, when you're buying any natives, any plants, period, if you're purchasing for a pollinator garden, if you're wanting to support the pollinators, do your best to get the straight varieties, meaning the ones that have not been hybridized or altered in any way, because those are the ones that have evolved with our pollinators, alongside our pollinators, and they will be the best for the pollinators. The pollinators will recognize them and eat them. They'll be more attracted to them. And often, like I said, when they breed for a trait, they lose another one. And in the case of several plants, the trait they lose is their nutritional content. So their quantity or value of nectar or the quantity or value of the pollen. Either way, it's not as valuable to the insects and the hummingbirds. So you won't see as many pollinators on a hybridized species as you will on a straight species. Let's talk design. What's blooming at the same time as this? Almost everything. Think of everything that blooms from June all the way through the fall. Echinacea will probably be blooming at the same time. So I'll talk about a few, but I'm not going to get into the whole list because it's extensive. What's blooming in my yard right now as I film? I have my orange milkweed behind me. I have my swamp milkweed over there. I have several clusters of ornamental and Asiatic lilies. Rudbeckia has started. Several penstemons are still going. My spring blooming mountain aster is in full bloom. It's starting to fade. Lavender is going. Put one of these next to a lavender. Mwah! Stunning, gorgeous color combination. 2 different shades of pinky purples. Absolutely fantastic. Daylilies are also another one that bloom well next to this. They're absolutely stunning. Just pick a color that complements your echinacea. Pick a good daylily to go with that, and it'll knock your socks off all summer long. Another plant that's great next to echinacea is salvia. So you think of like May night salvia or any of those varieties. Absolutely stunning, and the bloom time is about the same. Remember, if you're enjoying this video, make sure to like it, and please subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, gardeners. I hope you enjoyed this video and you learned something new. If you did, make sure to tell me by hitting the like button. If you have any questions, as always, leave them in the comments down below. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe so you get more gardening content in your video feed every single week. This is part of my native plant showcase, which I'm doing a whole series of, so there should be enough videos to fill the entire summer with these things. So expect more content exactly like this if you subscribe now. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the garden.